The New Boss is the 13th episode of Back to You. Technically, it is the 13th, but it actually, according to Wikipedia, has the production code of 1ANX10. And Montana hasn't been in it for a couple of episodes, so I think this one was meant to air a couple of episodes back. But actually, it doesn't make a tremendous amount of difference because there is zero mention of Gracie in this. So if, like me, you were waiting to find out what happens next with Gracie, we need to wait a little bit longer. There will be some spoilers as I discuss what happens in this, but I'm not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail, mostly because really not a lot happens. It's interesting, and I enjoyed it, but there's not a lot of variety to it. The station has a new boss. This is Ginger Ko, played by Suzy Nakamura, and initially she seems like a nice enough person, but then it clearly turns out that she has no human compassion, and she is just there to get the job done. And unfortunately, the job involves telling Ryan to fire Montana. And the reason that she's firing Montana, there is some logic to it, but it's also a very terrible way to fire somebody. And I feel like in the UK, you definitely couldn't get away with this. I could be wrong, but I will tell you now, so this is of course a spoiler for what happens at the beginning, and I will spoil ultimately what happens at the end. I will explain what happens. Ginger is in her office and she's made some changes, such as getting rid of water bottles, which is absolutely ridiculous. So Kelly and Chuck go up to talk to her to try and straighten things out. And she seems really nice and really easy to talk to. And she's just having a nice conversation with Chuck and Kelly about the news team and what they're like. And they're full of praises for everybody. And then Ginger asks what Montana is like. And they kind of don't immediately give any opinions. They kind of pause and then say that she's a nice girl. And that's why Ginger is firing Montana, because they hesitated in their answer. And I understand her logic. They were quick at praising the others, and then it came to Montana, and they just didn't have anything to say about Montana's working ability. But at the same time, if Montana were to fight this in the UK, they would have to give a valid reason for why they let her go. And colleagues pausing when answering a question about her definitely wouldn't be a valid excuse. But nevertheless, this is what's happening, and Ryan spends the majority of the episode... Well, he spends most of the episode sweating, actually. He is panicking about this. I don't blame him. It clearly isn't a nice thing to do. He doesn't want to have to do this. Chuck and Kelly also feel a bit guilty because they feel like it was their fault because they've paused, which is absolutely ridiculous. And Ryan does ultimately have to let Montana go. And then we find out something about Montana that I hadn't expected, is that she's not Hispanic. And that her real name is Sally Lerner, but whenever she sent in audition tapes to stations, they didn't want to hire her because they wanted to hire minorities. So she pretended to be a minority. I liked her a little bit less after revealing that because it's not great. And that's not exactly a really positive note on which to end with regard to the end of the character, but never mind. It is what it is. And there was a slightly awkward moment where Marsh said that he used to know a Louise Lerner from where Montana was from. And we can kind of guess there that maybe she could have been Marsh's daughter. They didn't really do much about that. I think that's definitely left up to viewer interpretation, but I wasn't expecting that either. So I'd kind of already made my peace with the end of Montana. I had noticed that she'd not been in a couple of episodes, so I did look up the information on Wikipedia, and there's some information about the character on there. So I knew she wasn't coming back into it. Well, I thought she wasn't coming back into it. I just assumed they'd just kind of dropped the character never to be mentioned again. So to have her brought back, only to then have her let go at the end of the episode, was a very strange experience. And the lack of mention of Gracie is obviously incredibly frustrating, because I'm desperate to know if they tell other people. And what's particularly heartbreaking about this now is that there's only one more episode left in the UK. The information on Wikipedia explains it better, but basically the season finale is the next episode that's in the UK. There were a couple of episodes that aired in Australia after the fact, and there were a couple of episodes released on the US DVD release. But as far as I'm aware, all I can find in the UK is the finale. But it is actually, I think, assuming, the actual final episode. But more on that when we get there. For now, I can say The New Boss is an absolutely fine episode. It feels a little bit strange. Montana had already left in my mind, and I'm desperate to find out what happens next with Gracie. Looking forward to it, but I'll be sad when it's over.